Ladies and gentlemen, kia ora tātou, good morning everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Regional Council, 24th of February, and I'll ask Councillor Bevan to take us through the prayer, please. Okay, apologies. I have received no apology, councillor, from any councillor. Notices today, have you got any notices, staff? No notices. Right, conflict of interest declarations. Minutes of the meeting, 27th of January. So very quickly, for accuracy, page 2. 3, 4. Page turned over, page 5, page 6, 7, 8, and a signature on page 9. Is someone happy to move that that's a true and correct record? Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. We have a seconder for that, and Councillor Scott, thank you. Put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Any matters arising from those minutes? Councillor Hewitt.
Just agenda item 4 and the legal advice sought on whether due process was followed with the sale of the Maraewa shops. Shop piece of land. I'm just wondering what the outcome of that was.
Right.
That was, sorry, you asked the question and you're wondering what the result of that is. Yes. We've had legal advice that due process was followed, and we've advised the person who wrote the letter to us of that. We're waiting to see whether or not he wants to take it any further.
Thank you. Further, Councillor Balfour.
This item 16 minor items. The first one related to the water symposium. So where does that stand? And in view of, I think this just past week, the minister has released a discussion document on freshwater management options, which raises all sorts of issues, which I would assume we probably would feel we needed to run through our regional planning committee also, and the submission date ends April 22nd. I'm not sure this is the place to raise this issue, right, okay. But given that we have a symposium on the calendar, how does this all work in terms of this council having a discussion of any submission we would want to make on that matter?
So the intention with the symposium is still to proceed, and we've been in discussions with the Minister for the Environment's office about his attendance at the symposium as an opportunity for him to also explain his intended reforms as part of a wider discussion around water management issues. That discussion is ongoing, and we will make a decision in the next week about whether to proceed either with the Minister or without the Minister. The Minister has expressed an intention to come to Hawke's Bay, and the question is really whether we run two separate events. He runs his event and we run our event, or whether there is some combination of the two, given that there's high public interest in the government's reforms, and there's high overlap between what he'll be wanting to talk about and what we'll be wanting to have in the symposium. It does make sense to either have one event or two events in very close proximity. With respect to the submission on the reforms, you note that it is 2 days after the RPC. What we're planning to do is do a draft submission on the issues, circulate it to the Regional Planning Committee in advance of the meeting, get input from the members as to the content of that, and then take it to the RPC meeting on the 20th of April for finalisation before submitting to the Ministry 2 days afterwards.
Thank you. No other matters arising. Right. Follow-up items on page 3, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of these, I think, are self-explanatory. As I've noted there, I haven't yet set a date for a specific discussion around water royalties at either future council meeting or workshop. I was really sort of putting that on hold or waiting to see where the water symposium date ends up and whether or not that's a possibility for discussion there. So haven't yet confirmed anything there. Most of the other items that are listed,
And sorry to harp on this, but this discussion document does seem to raise the prospect of allocating water according to highest economic value and so forth, which seems to open the door to a discussion of how might the things that Peter's been recommending and others, I mean, it seems like that's all fair game in this discussion document. And for us to get a staff paper shoved to the Regional Planning Committee 2 days before the submission deadline,
Well,
et cetera, it just seems like this needs more attention quicker, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, could I just perhaps comment on that? So the intention was not to shove a paper two days prior to the deadline. The intention was to get a paper out well in advance of that meeting and get feedback and a dialogue going by email round robin as opposed to taking it to a council meeting. We just don't have a regional planning committee meeting until such time. So the discussion on the 20th will be simply finalisation as opposed to the very first time that anyone's seen the document.
So to follow on from Councillor Belford, give me a time estimate. When are you hoping to have something to committee members? A month before, 3 weeks before?
Yeah,
A month before.
3 to 4 weeks before.
3 to 4 weeks
yes,
before.
Yes.
Okay.
So work is commencing now on our thinking in relation to the proposals. They're obviously extensive. It's a big piece of work. So that's been tasked up in the team, and we'll get it out as soon as we can. But I'm imagining 3 to 4 weeks prior to the discussion will be realistic.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said, I think the others are statuses are fairly self-explanatory, and I'm happy to take questions if they arise.
Me old mate up the Waiau River, the Waihi Dam. Can someone give me an update on that?
So through you, Chair, what we're proposing to do is it's a pretty rapidly evolving sort of operation up there now, particularly given that Eastland Group have been consented through us to commence the works to get the gates repaired. What we're proposing to do is circulate a regular email update to Council advising them of what stage we're at. Effectively though, plant and equipment was on site last week to commence the repair of the gate that's open and the removal of sediment behind the gate, or the 2 gates that are currently jammed closed. So they've got plant and equipment on site to do that. We're getting regular updates from Eastland Group on progress now in that regard, and we're proposing simply to wrap those up in an email and keep you abreast of it. Parallel to that, as we've mentioned earlier, there is an active investigation underway, and that started in earnest last week and continues this week.
When you say active investigation, what do you mean by active investigation? By whom, into what?
By our enforcement staff into the background of the situation, how it evolved, how it developed, what happened, who did what, when, why, what the results of that were, and what the impacts of it are.
Supplementary question. I noticed that your report focuses on the gates and the mechanism to close the gates. But what's of most interest to me is the release of sediment down the river. What has happened to stop the sediment flows into the river?
So the sediment flows into the river won't stop until the gates are shut. But what Eastland Group have done is have installed a gabion basket system close to the confluence of the Waiau River, and as a result of the consenting process for the further works, they've installed a second one of those, so effectively 2 sediment traps which are intended to capture as much sediment as practicable before it enters the Waiau River. However, it will not completely trap and stop all sediment entering the river. That will not stop until the gates are shut.
Supplementary question, if I just continue with this. So when do you expect when is the first barrier to be put in place? When is the second one to be put in place? And when do you expect this work to be completed?
The first barrier was put in place 2 weeks ago, I think, and the second barrier is being constructed and put in place now. When do they expect to finish this work? Their indications to us were 3 weeks from Wednesday last week.
So this is approximately 3 months after the gates were open. I want to have an explanation why it's taken 3 months for this regional council to insist on those barriers being put in place.
Through you, Mr Chairman, it hasn't taken the Regional Council 3 months to insist. The Regional Council issued an abatement notice on the 24th of December 2015, which is 2 months ago today. The issue has been Eastern Group physically being able to get the gate shut. We're as frustrated as anybody with the pace or lack of pace of progress, but I think that the implication that the Regional Council hasn't done as bit is perhaps misguided, in that we have been in constant dialogue with Eastern Group. We have shared the frustration of the Wairau public at the pace at which they've seemed to have moved, and we continue to urge them to make progress.
So
quick-
my question, Councillor. So we're more than frustrated, though. We are investigating pending a possible prosecution, correct?
Absolutely. So any action or indeed inaction that has been taken by Eastern Group will certainly form part of any court case.
Can I just follow up? You said about the about the abatement issued on the 24th of December. As I understand it, that abatement notice was withdrawn or not acted upon, and a second one was put in sometime later. So the 24th is wrong. Is that correct?
So just to clarify, an abatement notice was issued on the 24th of December last year, and the Eastland Group came back to us and said they were concerned about the safety and integrity of the dam and therefore that of the public. So we sought advice from our own engineering staff internally, who agreed that there was some risk, and so we agreed to suspend the abatement notice. Subsequently, the engineers were able to visit the site and make some assessments and confirm that the risk was low, and therefore the original notice could be reenacted, and that was done on about the 5th of January, I think is the date that we did that. And perhaps just to add some additional context, I know that there was a question raised by council some time ago around why we didn't turn up with our own diggers and start digging things out and fixing things up. We've sought advice on the provisions of taking, if you like, emergency action that exists under the legislation, and the advice is pretty clear that we couldn't and shouldn't have done that without conducting a very thorough investigation of all the options, given that you're dealing with a large structure and engineering issues. It's not the sort of thing we could just rush into and build our own thing to sort it out. We would have to have followed a process to assess options, look at risks, look at ways of mitigating them. Like the Chief Executive said, we are as frustrated as the public, as frustrated as this council at the lack of impetus and progress of the Eastland Group, but it remains the Eastlands Group issue to deal with, and we are applying as much pressure as we are legally able to do to get them to take action to sort this issue out, and we are not ceasing to do that.
Could I have you said you got legal advice. Could that be circulated to councillors, please?
I'll have to check. It may well be legally privileged, and I'm not sure whether we should be sharing it. But
Well,
I will check and I'll
if it
find
is,
out.
expect a Local Government Official Information Act request. I don't believe any information of that nature that comes to you as an official should be denied to councillors. The second, that's
I'm not saying it's going to be denied. I'm just saying I'm not sure
giving you
whether
a
we
fair
can
warning if
release
you do
it.
deny it. The next point I want to come back to is I'm really intrigued by this. All the focus has been on fixing the gates of the dam, but the central issue is the release of sediment into the river, which has destroyed swimming holes, fishing holes, filled in, ruined the river. Irrigation system, that is the problem, not the dam. and why this council did not insist on structures being put in place to slow down and stop the sediment, ignore the dam, ignore the gates, I cannot for the life of me understand. Now, if you can get me a paper that tells me that we are absolutely impotent and unable to act in that regard, I'd like to see it.
So, Councillor, perhaps you're missing some points in what I'm saying here.
No, I'm not.
We were advised of this issue on about the 18th of December, I think, through one of our land management staff. He finally figured out where the source of the issue was on the 21st of December and advised our staff. We took action on the 24th. Closing the gate will stop the discharge of sediment to the river. We also then traversed options at that point on how we could practically stop the discharge of sediment other than closing the gate, as did Eastland Group. And one of the earliest bits of advice out of their engineer, who was a specialist dam engineer, was to look at installing the scabion basket system. We worked through that quickly as they provided the information to us to consent it and get it constructed, and it was put in place. But it won't stop the discharge of sediment to the river. It is mitigating some of it. It is capturing some of it, but there's no way that you could construct anything.
We're going around in circles here. Would it be fair to say, Mr Maxwell, that the investigation and pending report will satisfy all, Councillor?
It's going to go into all of the details around what could have been done, what should have been done, why wasn't it done, the history and background to why this situation arose. I'll go back to my basic point is that the way to stop the discharge from the dam is to shut the sluice gate.
And you can't
Councillor
do that,
Bevan.
what do you do?
I'm assuming that the investigation you do will look at the history of maintenance as part of that.
Absolutely, it's a pivotal part of it.
Councillor Graham.
Well, suffice to say, I agree with the frustration which is emanating from Councillor Barker on this issue. We went up and had a look at the situation, and it's just a huge tragedy. I do have a question too, by the way, because I'm really interested in, and I've written a list of questions in terms of maintenance and directors' liability. I'm really interested in this because the environmental disaster which has occurred from it is tremendous. And as for them saying risk to the public, well, there was no water behind that dam. Just it's actually a little tiny dam, lump of concrete in the middle of nowhere. So I'd like to know what their grounds for saying risk. And we lost 5 days because of that. So it just seems to me to be a series of procrastination by them, which is continuing. And the locals there in Fenton will attest to this. They're worried about the pippy beds out in the bay now. They're worried about their water, the article in the Dominion yesterday. And I think I have huge sympathy with the frustration of the farmers there who can't pump the water, of the locals in Wairau who are having to spend extra money, and of the worry that they have that their fishing beds are going to be destroyed, their pippy beds, and there's no fish in the Wairau River to catch anymore. I mean, it is a shambles. And so I do want to know what the grounds for prosecution are. I do want to know what the risk to the public was. I can't see any risk to the public. The house is on one hill, and there's no water anyway. It just seems to be a litany of excuses from them. And I appreciate we're going to get them. We're going after them. I want to go after them.
So there's no question in there that all I'll do is reiterate them from a staff perspective. No stone is being left unturned around what the impact of this event has been on the environment and on people. So there is a pretty comprehensive program of work underway, and I'm not going to share it all with you because it is part of our investigation to look at the detail around this. We are going to figure out how the situation arose. Rest assured, as I'm telling people, no stone is being left unturned. What we are very conscious of is, and that I'm conscious of, is that I don't want to prejudice our position when we get to the point of saying what's our next step by doing or saying something or providing information that disadvantages this council and taking any particular action it chooses at the right point in time. But as staff, we absolutely agree that the way the Eastland Group have approached this has been incredibly lackadaisical. It's been ambivalent. It's been without urgency. And they fail, in my view, to understand the significance of this event and have failed to take action in a timely manner to deal with it. Now, time will tell whether that my feelings are the right ones or not. That will come out in the investigation.
Councillor Dick. All of the above. Councillor Dick.
Just for understanding, when the dam is operating properly in an operational sense, under what circumstances are the sluice gates opened?
So, well, it depends on the dam and the conditions they have. This dam has a condition that allows them to operate the sluice gates effectively at high flows,
Yes.
when the Waiau River is at a high level.
Yes.
Now, the whys and wherefores of that and whether those conditions were satisfied and the dam managed appropriately form, like I say, a pivotal part of the investigation.
Okay.
What's the background to this situation? Why did the situation develop? How has it been created?
And the high flow release is to prevent overflow, essentially, is it?
Well, the sluice gates have two purposes. One is to you want to avoid overtopping the dam by such a great extent as that it challenges the integrity of the structure and risks failure of it. And the sluice gates also, if operated correctly, will provide some way of mobilising and removing sediment from the reservoir. So they have a dual purpose. And our understanding is that they are largely an automated system, so they rely on information to the operation saying how much is coming into it and how much is going out of it, what are the relative flows, and then looking to balance it, but it can also be operated manually.
So one of the prime purposes is to facilitate sediment flow?
Correct, yes.
And do they open from the base? Do they?
Correct, yes. So they open from the bottom of the dam up, and the difference in this situation, and in the words of the engineers, is potentially a design flaw, is that instead of the sluice gates kind of coming down to the base of the reservoir and sitting flush with them, they actually sit below the bed of the reservoir. They sit in what they call a stilling basin, and it's the stilling basin that is full of sediment now, and means that the sluice gate is unable to be closed because the arms of the gates are sitting on the sediment in the reservoir, in the bottom of the stilling basin.
So they may well have have to do some serious modifications.
It's a possibility, and I mean, my suspicion would be that the Eastland group are probably looking very hard at how this structure has been constructed, is being operated, and what its viability in the future may be, I suspect.
Thank you.
One further question. This flow of sediment down the river had been going on for quite some time. People were not quite sure, but months before it became notified. What I can't get my head around is what obligations were on Eastland, or the owner of the dam, to have notified the regional council of a failure. This is a monumental failure. And if they have failed to notify us for, say, 2 months, what are the consequences for that? There must be some consequences. If we haven't got that on our resource consent, we must have it in the future, because they have simply destroyed the river knowingly, watched it week after week.
So again, that's part of the investigation and is a pivotal part of it, is when were the gates opened and why, and the consequences of that. Look, I can't say any more about that other than that is an important component of the investigation.
The second thing about your investigation, there's a contest of views here. I don't necessarily share your view, but if it comes out that the council was powerless to act to save the sediment going down the river because we had to go through this long bureaucratic process, then I think there needs to be a significant change in the way we operate. We could see a problem, it was there, in my view, eminently fixable. It's not a big river, it's a small river, could have got on the job in 5 minutes. Well, I look at this and I just see that it was Christmas time, people are on holiday, it was all happening, been drifting all along, and people just said, oh, well, what can you do? And it just drifted. That's my impression of what's happened here. Whether I'm right or wrong,
The investigation will determine, correct.
just drifted.
Okay, I think we've drifted enough here, Councillor Barker. Any other questions in regard to other aspects of this report? So I'm happy to move then that we accept the report. We have a seconder. Councillor Barker, thank you. I just would like to briefly speak about the Waihi Dam, obviously. I've done more than just drive up there and have a look and a beer in the pub. I've actually been sitting around tables and doing quite a bit, actually. And the frustration has got to be seen to be believed. The Cricklewood scheme has not had water for 3 months now. They've sold most of their lambs on a very low market. The financial implications of this thing go further than just the challenges of creating water for the Wairau district. The Mayor, Craig Little, yesterday at his council meeting, threw his support behind the regional council in their investigation and prosecution. They will have a keen interest in how that goes, because the intake for the Wairau township comes from the Waiau River. Generally, it operates with 1.5 metre of clearance from the riverbed. At the moment, it's 300 mils and closing. So there is a chance that the Wairau township and the biggest user in the town, AFCO, will struggle to get water in the near future if this thing is not remedied, or nature doesn't intervene and put a cyclone of some sort through and clean the channel out. This is beyond just frustration. This is actually extremely serious and of national significance. And Eastland, for whatever reason, I've met with their chairman, I've met with their chief executive, we communicate, sometimes quite tersely. I've revved them in the paper, I've done all that sort of stuff, but actually they've got to front it up and fix this jolly thing. And the length of time it's taken, and as what someone said, procrastination is big as belief with a modern company in 2016. It's crazy stuff. These guys have got interests all over New Zealand and the world, and yet they treat the Wairau district like a dumping ground, and I think we're all sick of it. So going forward, the sooner this thing's finished and behind us, the better. And if there are impediments to us acting earlier or doing things with more urgency, and what I've seen, we've been hammered down. They're the guys that have been the laggards in this. And they need to take ownership of it. But if there are some things we can fix going forward, I actually agree with Councillor Barker, we need to look at that. If there's a challenge to the way the RMA is affected nationally, we need to challenge that, because this can't be a blueprint for disasters in the future. And it is a disaster. There's no toing and froing on that. Wish to speak?
Thank you. I'm one of those who stands accused of taking a car trip and having a beer in a pub, and I plead guilty to it. The thing that was really interesting was to go and talk to the locals and to see for yourself. The first thing that struck me was this isn't actually a large river, eminently controllable. It's not a large river at all, but it does generate a significant amount of power. The other thing that struck me about this is that they had a dam in a place which was going to be high in sediment. Everybody knows the sediment flows in this river are going to be very high. And we all know that dams have a life limited by the amount of sediment inflow into the dam behind it. So what I saw, this is my view of it, with its dam gate being open and all the sediment draining out, this was actually to the benefit of the dam owner. Because by clearing all the sediment from behind the dam and that 5-mile thing, they were increasing the life of the dam. The amount at which they could hold water for longer would increase its life. And they're increasing the life of the dam at the expense of the river. And down in front of the dam was a fishing hole. And in front of that was a swimming hole. All those swimming holes, fishing holes had gone. This was now a sea of mud. And a sea of mud all the way down the river. You could see it in Wairau. And Councillor Wilson is correct. The riverbed has now risen all the way down the river. So what this puts is the whole of the valley at a flood risk, an increased flood risk, because the river beds are all up now, and the amount of water those rivers will be able to hold is less. Councillor Graham has hit the nail on the head. There's been huge environmental losses with this. Sediment into the pippy beds, all the rest of it, fishing, we have all lost. And while we were losing, Eastland stood by, did nothing, said nothing. A complete wall of silence for months. And they knew what was happening, they knew what the consequences were, and they knew what the benefit was to them. They could have got those gates fixed, in my view, fast, had they wanted to. They could have put in another dam, small one, to hold the river, to stop the sediment, had they wanted to. Some moving contractors of people I know on the West Coast would have put that in half a day. Done. Rock the lot. 2 days to build a whole lot of them. No problem. This is not a big job. Could have been fixed. The sediment could have been held while the gate was then fixed. They did not. What irritates me about this is that we have now, 2 months after it became known to us, only got the mitigation measures in. 2 months more has gone by, and I'm frustrated the hell about that. I cannot believe we allowed so much time to go past. Now, Ian and the staff may say we could do nothing more than that. It may be the case. But if that's what it turns out of this investigation, well then I want change. I do not want to see us be in a position where something like that is wrong, eminently fixable. We cannot go and fix it because what they have done is got a benefit out of this, Eastland have, and the cost has been to all of our communities, significant cost, and I'm brassed off to the bloody hilt about that. I'm seriously pissed, if I can say that. I've never seen such environmental degradation damage like it ever. Wanton damage.
Well, I think we've established that. Okay. Other speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you. Minor items. Which is, where's that? Right. Who did you point to? No one. Oh, Councillor Bevan. Other speakers? Okay. I was going to do Waihi, but I think that's been done enough, so we'll leave that. Okay, let's move on.